Turns out, she's just cuter and more vulnerable than you, which makes me want to protect her. You know, men are drawn to protect women who appear weaker. My husband boasted, his face swollen with arrogance. This came after I'd stumbled upon his affair and confronted him, only to be met with a string of excuses and outright defiance. He sought my agreement, but there was no way I could nod along. Furthermore, he had no intention of leaving me or breaking things off with his mistress. Continuing a marriage with such a man was out of the question. So, I packed my bags, returned to my childhood home, and vented to my brother, Daniel. After hearing me out, Daniel broke into a broad smile.
Well, that's great news.
What's great about it? Hearing about my sister being cheated on, and his first reaction is that's great? I couldn't help but yell at him, but Daniel just kept smiling. And then, I noticed the fierce anger hidden behind his smile, an emotion that didn't quite match his expression. My name is Arya, and I'm 31 years old. Anthony, my husband, was a colleague at the same company. Since joining, we'd consult each other on work, collaborate, and eventually became friends who could talk about anything. We'd often go out for drinks, discussing not just work but also personal matters, deepening our bond. After a company party a few months later, Anthony confessed his feelings for me as we were leaving. Attracted to his bright, sociable nature and his kindness, I didn't hesitate to accept his proposal, and we began dating. Our relationship flourished as we continued to share meals and consult each other on work. Both of us loved exploring new places, leading to trips on weekends and vacations abroad. Spending more time with Anthony, I found myself increasingly drawn to him, eventually realizing I wanted to be with him forever. That moment in our 5th year at the company, when Anthony surprised me with a proposal, remains unforgettable. In a private room of a glamorous restaurant, opening the ring box, I was so moved that tears wouldn't stop. I had no reason to refuse, so I immediately accepted the proposal. We both loved breathtaking views, especially the sea, where we had many memories, so we decided to have our wedding in a place overlooking the ocean. Blessed with good weather, it was the best day. I enjoyed my work and wanted to continue discussing it with Anthony even after getting married, but working in the same environment as a couple was difficult, so I ended up transferring to another branch, although my job didn't change much. 3 years into our marriage, we were still happily living together. We would dine out several times a month and travel a few times a year. Our relationship with Anthony's parents was good, and we were living a happy married life. To anyone looking in, we must have seemed like the perfect couple. Indeed, I felt that way too. But that feeling lasted only until this day. Since the next day was a holiday, we had planned to dine out late after work, as we usually did. However, when work was winding down, I received a message from Anthony.
Sorry, Arya. I got invited to dinner by a client tonight, and I can't say no since they've been really good to us recently. I won't be able to make it to our dinner.
I felt lonely but said, I see. Can't be helped. I was looking forward to trying that restaurant, so let's go another time.
Sure, I'll make it up to you. I'll probably be late tonight, so don't wait up. Bye.
Anthony quickly ended the call. As I was about to leave work, my phone rang again. It was from my friend Camila. Hello?
Hey, Arya. Are you free tonight? Wanna grab a drink? It's been a while.
Actually, that works out. Anthony is out to dinner with a client tonight. Camila is my best friend. We're colleagues at the same company, though now we work in different departments. She gave a speech at my wedding and sometimes comes over to our place. Since she and Anthony were also hired at the same time, we've hung out as a trio several times, being drinking buddies with Anthony. It's always more fun when the 3 of us get together. Sometimes, like today, she'd call out of the blue, and we'd meet up for a casual drink when available. We decided to meet at the station near my house, so I left the office and headed to the station. The train arrived just in time, and I got to the station quite early, but Camila was already there waiting. Sorry to keep you.
Long time no see. I just got here too.
After exchanging a few words, we headed to a restaurant. There's a fairly large entertainment district on the way from the station to our house. And we entered a restaurant just off the main street of this area. We started with a toast with beer and then moved on to catching up, as usual.
How's it going recently? Anthony doing well?
Yeah, he's fine. Just the usual, you know? Work has settled down for now, so it's not as busy or tiring.
How about you, Camila?
Were you working around here today?
Exactly. This area falls under my jurisdiction, so I come here occasionally. On the contrary, I've been swamped with clients since the beginning of the month. I'm truly exhausted every day. At this rate, no man will come near me.
Camila is the epitome of a career woman. Though attractive in face and figure, her blunt personality and strong will seem to keep men at bay. After sharing what's on our minds and feeling the mutual encouragement to keep pushing forward, we left the restaurant in the usual high spirits.
This entertainment district has a really nice vibe.
Mind if we take a slow walk back? To that, I replied.
Sure, a walk to the station will help sober us up.
And so, we decided to stroll through the bustling streets towards the station. As we walked, our conversation continued.
Arya, you're lucky. You've got a good husband, and it seems like your married life is going well. Are you thinking about having kids anytime soon? Well, we don't really talk about it much. We both love our jobs, and I worry about how pregnancy might affect my work. We're thinking someday, but it's hard to find the right timing.
While discussing this, a certain restaurant came into view. It was the place Anthony and I had planned to dine at tonight. The windows were absent, replaced by glass walls allowing a dim view into the elegant interior. The orange chandeliers inside, deliberately subdued, caught my eye. Just as I thought, I'd like to come here next time, I recognized a familiar figure. I stopped in my tracks.
Arya, what's wrong?
Unable to respond to Camila, my gaze was fixed on the restaurant. There was Anthony, seated across from an unfamiliar woman. She appeared slightly younger than me, dressed in revealing clothing. Anthony had said he was dining with a client tonight, but the woman across from him hardly seemed like a business associate. They were chatting and laughing together.
Isn't that Anthony?
What's going on? Camila seemed to have noticed Anthony inside as well. I was too shocked to know what to do. Seeing my state, Camila suggested.
Arya, maybe you should confront him directly?
Yeah, you're right. I took out my mobile phone from my bag and took a photo of Anthony and the unknown woman. As I began to calm down, anger started to bubble up. Upon reaching the station, Camila offered.
Should I come with you to confront him? Having both of us there might make Anthony more likely to tell the truth.
Thanks, but it's a family matter. I'll talk to him myself. I declined her offer and we parted ways. On my way home, I struggled to contain the growing anger. About an hour after I arrived home, Anthony returned.
I'm home.
Welcome back.
How was dinner with the client?
It was tough, you know. They wanted to go to a second place, and they drink a lot. But I think I made a good impression. Right after he finished speaking, I pointed my mobile phone at him, showing him the photo.
This person is from your client? She looks quite young. Dressed not quite for work. Did she change before meeting you, Anthony?
What? Why? You didn't follow me, did you?
Of course not. I was dining out with Camila. We just happened to see this on our way back. Is this person really a client? Choosing such a fancy restaurant for dinner, from which company is she?
Well,
What? Can't answer? She's not someone you need to hide from me, right?
Sorry.
Sorry? You mean, this is an affair? She's your mistress? Hey! Answer me.
Yes. I broke down crying.
Why? Why would you do this? I thought we were doing fine.
It's your fault, Arya. You're always busy with work, and though you take care of home, I wanted you to pay more attention to me.
You're straightforward and strong, but she's cute and makes me want to protect her. Eventually, I found it more enjoyable to be with her than with you."
Hearing those words was a shock. No longer feeling any affection from him. Clearly preferring his affair partner. I would have preferred he just said it was a friends with benefits. I couldn't stay any longer, packed what I needed, and left the house. Dragging my carry-on, I caught the last train home. The journey back home felt longer than usual. I don't remember what I was thinking. Maybe I was too hurt to think about anything. Next thing I knew, I was in front of my parents' house. I had a key but hadn't called ahead, so I rang the doorbell. Daniel, my brother, opened the entrance door.
Daniel?
Hey! Long time no see. What brings you here at this hour? Daniel is a workaholic. After graduating, he worked for a major company for 3 years before starting his own business. His sales have been growing steadily, and now he's the president of a company with dozens of employees. He hardly ever comes home, and he couldn't even attend my wedding due to an important business meeting. I knew Daniel got married a year ago from our parents, but since there was no wedding ceremony, I had only briefly greeted his wife, with whom I hadn't formed a close connection. It had been years since I last saw Daniel.
Daniel, what about you? How are Mom and Dad?
Haha. What about me? It's my parents' house too. I finally got a long vacation, so I thought I'd come back and do some filial piety. By the way, they're currently on a trip to Hawaii, using the travel vouchers I gave them. Never thought I'd be house-sitting. His cheerful demeanor hadn't changed. A bit too carefree, but he's the type to make bold moves. I could imagine his employees finding it a pleasant place to work. So, what brings you here at this time, Arya? I was taken aback by Daniel's presence, momentarily forgetting why I had come home.
Sorry. I just had some trouble at home. I was hoping to stay here for a while.
Ah, of course. It's not my house, but it's fine. Your room is available, so come on in. Once you're settled, I'll make some coffee and you can tell me all about it. I felt comforted by Daniel's warmth. After setting down my bags, I decided to take a shower to freshen up. I felt a bit better, but I couldn't calm down. Anger was bubbling up inside me. When I entered the living room, Daniel was watching TV. Refreshed? I'll make some coffee then. As Daniel turned off the TV and I sat down, I began to tell him about the day's events over coffee. How we had been getting along as a married couple. How we had planned to go out to dinner as usual. How he canceled because he said he was going out to dinner with a client. How I ended up drinking with Camila. And, showing the photo on my mobile phone to Daniel, I told him.
On the way back from drinking, I saw Anthony and this woman at the restaurant we were supposed to go to. When I confronted him after he came home, he admitted to having an affair with her, saying she was cuter and made him want to protect her more than me.
I told the story through tears. Daniel listened to me until the end, looking at my mobile phone. When I finished, he looked up and said something I never expected. I thought Daniel would comfort me, tell me to leave such a man, and be on my side. However, Daniel, with a wide smile, said,
Arya, that's great.
I slammed my hands on the table and stood up in disbelief. How is that great? I said, returning to my room. I couldn't understand why Daniel would say that, just thinking about it made me even angrier. I shouldn't have said anything. I regretted talking to Daniel as I lay down on the bed. I didn't want to return to the house where Anthony was, so I stayed at my parents' house. Daniel and I didn't talk much after that day. It was tough that I commute to work from my parents' house during the weekdays. It took twice as long as usual. I spent my time thinking about how hard it would be to file for divorce and demand compensation. A week later, on the weekend, I decided to relax in my room and play some mobile games, enjoying a leisurely time for the first time in a while. Just as I was thinking about getting some lunch, the doorbell rang.
Who could that be?
It was unusual to have visitors, so I went to the entrance. Then, there was Anthony. And he was apologizing to Daniel, who stood there imposingly. Why, though? Shouldn't he be apologizing to me, not Daniel? Then I heard Daniel's voice. I never imagined the other party would be you. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Anthony was still apologizing to Daniel. Layla's cuter and needs protection, huh? Layla? The only Layla I knew was Daniel's wife. Confused, Daniel continued. Lately, Layla's been acting restless and clearly hiding something from me. Her expressions when I talked to her weren't right, so I started suspecting an affair. I was considering hiring a detective, and right then, Arya came back home. I was shocked when Arya showed me a photo of your affair, and there was Layla in it. Sad but also surprised that it was a family member involved. You never know what's going to happen. This will make the divorce court and compensation claims easier, though. I was speechless. Turns out, Anthony's affair partner was Daniel's wife, Layla. The woman Anthony had been dining with wore heavy makeup, completely unrecognizable to me. It had been a while since I last saw her, and I didn't remember her wearing that much makeup. When you contacted me, I truly felt sorry for what I had done. I will cut off all contact with Layla, so please forgive me. Apparently, Daniel had reached out to Anthony about the affair. Daniel noticed me standing there, stunned. Oh, Arya. You heard the conversation? Yeah, most of it. Good. Now we have all the information we need on Anthony and Layla, his affair partner. This will make it easier to file for compensation in the divorce proceedings. It's good you came home, Arya. Daniel said to me with a smile. So that's what it was. At that moment, I understood the meaning behind Daniel's words from a week ago. Why he had said that's great. What was Daniel feeling at that time? He was trying to comfort me, but maybe he was also speaking to himself. Thinking about Daniel's feelings, I decided to divorce Anthony and claim compensation in the divorce proceedings. Arya. It's my fault. Please forgive me. I can't pay the compensation if you demand it in the divorce proceedings. I ignored Anthony's plea for help. I'll contact you later with the details. Be prepared. Daniel then kicked Anthony out of the house. Afterward, Daniel told Layla about the divorce and filed for compensation. Layla initially resisted but seemed to accept the demands after discussing Anthony. I also demanded a divorce and compensation from Anthony. After being clearly told by Daniel, Anthony complied without resistance. When the divorce was finalized, I received a call. It was from Anthony's mother. Expecting a scolding, I hesitantly answered, but heard an apology instead. She was sincerely sorry for his actions. It seemed Anthony blamed Layla for the divorce, and Layla blamed Anthony, leading to their breakup. His parents apologized repeatedly for their son's inadequacies and said they had disowned him. Hearing this from them, I felt a sense of relief. Anthony was now disowned by his parents, with no one to turn to, left alone. I decided to start anew. Every month, the compensation from Anthony was deposited, but one day, he showed up at my parents' house, asking to reduce the compensation. Please, can you reduce the compensation? No way. Do you understand how I felt being cheated on? There's no reducing the compensation unless my feelings are healed. Leave. I turned him away. Yet, he kept coming back, week after week, asking for a reduction. The compensation won't change no matter how many times you come. If you keep this up, I'll call the police. I responded calmly. But Anthony apparently didn't believe I would actually call the police. His demands eventually shifted from reducing the compensation to stopping payments entirely, even suggesting a condescending offer of reconciliation. When I started calling the police right in front of him, Anthony changed his demeanor and fled from the house. The police advised me not to open the door anymore and to install a monitor-equipped doorbell to use if I recognized him. Fearing the police, Anthony resorted to sending lengthy text messages and making phone calls. After changing my email and phone number, things finally quieted down. However, Anthony tried to visit the branch where I worked without any business, and even enlisted colleagues to try to contact me, becoming a nuisance at both the main and branch offices. Once, I received a message from Camila. Working close to Anthony's department at the headquarters, Camila had been keeping a close eye on Anthony's current situation. Anthony, having begged a colleague to reach out to me, had his divorce exposed, and his harassment became known due to being spotted near my house during his commute. Realizing no one was on his side, feeling uncomfortable under their gazes and attitudes, he voluntarily resigned from the company. Despite his job search efforts, he struggled to find employment. And, unfortunately, joined a company involved in illegal activities. Desperate, he pleaded with the HR department to rehire him. Having abandoned all his responsibilities for his own convenience, there was no place for Anthony upon his attempted return. He was swiftly turned down, and Anthony, lacking the courage to resign a second time, endured a harsh life of commuting with the first train and working unpaid overtime until the last train. On the other hand, Layla had reached out several times, wondering if there was any chance to reconcile. However, Daniel recognized there was no love left. Like Anthony, Layla had quit her job upon the scandal becoming known, hoping to escape the situation. Sometime after the divorce, fearing poverty, Layla pleaded with Daniel, unable to pay the divorce settlement, and asked for a chance to start over. Daniel, seeing her focus solely on money, realized her true intentions. Refusing to reconcile or reduce the settlement, Layla claimed she couldn't pay because she had no money, failing to contribute a cent. Daniel, undeterred, contacted her parents. They were unaware of the divorce. They hurriedly apologized and paid on her behalf. Layla thought this settled everything, but her parents, having only covered the costs temporarily, demanded repayment and were furious. Now, Layla works under strict conditions at her parents' farm, which they manage. Since then, Daniel and I have been in touch more frequently. Sharing updates, how we've been, and the freshness of reconnecting after a long time brings a sense of family appreciation. Daniel continues to lead a busy life with work but seems to enjoy his days. It took me a while to recover. The shock of the affair and the loss of my married life brought stress. But support from family, bosses, seniors, and friends helped me view the experience positively. Now, without considering marriage, I'm enjoying my single life.
I visited the house, but I would throw away everything that belonged to Grandma, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. My son's wife said. She wasn't the only one who was troublesome. Get out. This shabby accident property is more than enough for free. This is the house where Grandma passed away, isn't it? This is an unlucky house that will only become a debt. Even her parents shout together. But that house. When I tried to say that. Okay. Okay. Please leave quickly. She was locked out with a sneer. I'm Camilla, 54 years old. My husband is David, 56 years old. My son Luke is in his second year of marriage. My son's wife is Ellie. She used to work for the same company as my son and retired when they got married. Luke has a transfer every 3 to 4 years due to work. I want to go with him, so it's difficult to decide when to quit, so I don't work. After getting married, Ellie became a housewife. The two of them rented an apartment relatively close to our house and lived there. A very smooth married life. Until then. Transfer has been decided. Luke called me. So? I thought it was about time. Where? It's a pretty far place. The land he mentioned was a distance that could be reached by Amtrak. So? When are you moving? You should check out supermarkets and stuff when you get there, and you should move with plenty of time for Ellie. So I gave Ellie some advice. Then? No, that's not it. Luke hesitated for a moment. And he continued with the next words. I'm going to be transferred alone. What? I expected a transfer, but being transferred alone was too unexpected. It's different from what we talked about before we got married. But Luke said something even more unexpected. Hey. The house where Grandma who is hospitalized now lived. It's empty now, right? So? She said she wants to live there or something. What? What do you mean? My mother who is hospitalized does have a house where she lives alone. But she hasn't passed away yet, and we haven't even thought about what to do after that time comes. It doesn't make sense for my son's wife to use it as her residence without permission. And on top of that, she wants to live there. It's too incomprehensible. I'll take the phone. Please. I thought I'd talk to her firsthand. Hello, this is Ellie. She answered the phone smoothly. And before I could ask her anything, she started talking. People will eventually end their lives. So when do you think she'll pass away? What? That's not good luck at all. And it's too insensitive. So I want to move there within a month after her death. Wait a minute. Can we talk about Luke's imminent transfer first? You said at the time of your marriage that you wouldn't work so you could go wherever you wanted whenever he moved. I thought you were ready to go with him on his transfer. Then? Well, that's true. But the story has changed, hasn't it? I didn't know there was an empty house before we got married. If we have a house, I won't have to work anymore, right? And if we live with my father and mother, we won't have to pay for nursing care in the future. What? Huh? What did you just say? Are you going to live with your parents? I threw questions at her in rapid succession. I didn't understand what she meant. Am I talking to an alien family? Are they going to use my mother's house as a base for conquering Earth? Wait. Can I talk to Luke? I think it will be a waste even if you talk. Bye. The phone was hung up. I couldn't talk with Luke. Of course, I immediately called Luke's smartphone. But he didn't answer the phone. I called him back many times, but he didn't answer. Was his wife telling him something right now? I told my husband what happened while my face turned pale. What? Naturally, my husband was also shocked. No. No. Wait a minute. Your mother was already hospitalized at Luke's wedding, and Ellie has never met her. So, why do you have to donate the house to her in-laws? My husband had almost the same reaction as me. You think so too? I thought for a moment that my values were strange because she said it so naturally. But as we talked, we gradually calmed down. Well, of course, that kind of talk won't work. If you refuse, it'll be okay. That's right. If I don't give her the key, and if I don't give permission for inheritance, which will probably happen, it'll be okay. But the Space family hadn't given up on their ambition to conquer Earth. Then Luke went on a business trip alone, and 6 months passed. According to Luke, his wife wouldn't move no matter what happened, and the moving date came. Of course, she stayed alone in the neighborhood during that time and didn't contact me at all. And then, my mother passed away. She had received a life expectancy notice and had been hospitalized for a long time, so I was naturally prepared. However, the funeral was tough. It's often said that when you're in this situation, you only remember good things, but my mother was really warm-hearted. So even though I held such feelings, tears flowed when we said our final goodbyes. After finishing the funeral and seeing off our relatives who had come to visit us, Luke's family was the last to leave. However, at that very last moment when they were leaving. Well then, mother-in-law. I've been saying this for a while now, but can I have the key? She said it in such a natural tone as if it were obvious. What? It wasn't a story to ask in this situation. I couldn't believe my ears. Oh. Never mind. I'll get it myself. Huh? She didn't even wait for me to recover from my confusion. I saw it there on the day of our wedding greeting. She walked into the living room without permission and opened one of the small drawers in the corner. Then she took out a key with a plate that read Mother's House. I think it took less than 3 minutes for her to do all of these actions. Each action, opening a drawer without permission, taking it away as if it were obvious. Today was a funeral. Everything was unreasonable. Wait a minute. I couldn't help but raise my voice in protest. But Ellie ignored such voices and went back to the entrance as if nothing had happened. Luke. When I realized that my voice wouldn't reach her, I called out to Luke instead. Stop that wife of yours. My son. My son, who had been stunned, finally came back to his senses. Wait a minute. Luke rushed to the entrance in a hurry and scolded his wife. Then, go back to your business trip quickly? This is our story living in Chicago. Outsiders should keep quiet. She said something like that. Outsiders? That house is. You won't make it to your reserved Amtrak if you don't hurry up and take a taxi soon? Call a taxi quickly. Then she opened the door and left. The door closed. Luke stood still. I sat down exhaustedly. Never come again. My husband trembled with anger. Luke had work to do and had already reserved an Amtrak ticket, so he went back home on that day. 2 weeks later, I called my daughter-in-law frequently and even visited her as a last resort without contacting her. However, she didn't answer the phone, and even though she was clearly at home, she didn't answer the doorbell. I called from in front of her room. She came out only once. I looked around the house, but I would throw away everything that belonged to Grandma, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. When will she come to the empty house? I didn't even know about it, so I went to the empty house every day. Then one day, I saw a moving company entering the house. My husband and I rushed over. This house. I tried to protest to the 3 people who came out of the house. However, I was shouted at by my daughter-in-law's father. Get out. This shabby accident property is more than enough for free. Daughter-in-law's mother also said, this is the house where Grandma passed away, isn't it? This is an unlucky house that will only become a debt. It was hopeless. When I tried to say, but that house, I was pushed out of the gate by my daughter-in-law's father with his shoulder and told to leave quickly. After that, no matter how much I rang the doorbell or what I did, there was no response. When I was about to leave, my eyes fell on a garbage bag. It contained a photo of my late father that my mother had decorated. Together with garbage. I took out the photo from the garbage bag. I'm sorry, Dad. I'll take you home. I'll clean you up. As tears flowed down my cheeks, I swore that this would definitely bring divine punishment and that I would never forgive them. At this point, it's not about rights to the house anymore. The Space family should go back to space. 1 month later, Luke returned from his business trip alone. He came back temporarily using the weekend. Apparently, he had finally taken a break from his relatively intense work. Let's go talk together, Luke suggested. The 3 of us went out together. There we saw a completely different appearance of my daughter-in-law, her father, and her mother, who had driven me out when we met before. All 3 of them looked haggard and had sunken eyes. I can't sleep, my daughter-in-law said with dark circles under her eyes. I hear noises like snap or rustle. I laughed softly. As expected. You said accident property yourself. If you throw away photos like that, well, you know. When you took over this house and I went to persuade you later and tried to say, but that house, you shut me out without listening and said okay. Please leave. This house is a house that my mother gave me saying, please take care of your father. What? It's their fault for not even listening to their wills. I explained it. Before his death, my father treasured my mother and me very much. He loved spending time with his family. So, to make sure he wouldn't be lonely after his death, my mother would offer wine that he liked twice a day and talk to him. I did it for her when she was absent. But it's strange, isn't it? Maybe it's because of my father's personality that watched over us before he passed away. There were various things like if we did home gardening, we could harvest crops, the rabbit we kept lived a long time, and my mother could pass away peacefully without much suffering. But this time is different, isn't it? Of course, he would be angry if he was suddenly thrown out. What? As my daughter-in-law was about to say something like, there's no such thing as a curse, there was another snappy sound somewhere in the house. The three of them huddled together. It's not just the sound, there's a leak, and sometimes something crumbles with a rustling sound. It's too dangerous to sleep at night. Well, that must have really angered my father. I said leisurely. If it's such a haunted house, you should have told us. That's not something you should say after occupying it without permission. All three of them seemed unable to retort. Well, it's time to leave. My husband declared. What? Don't decide to leave on your own. When my daughter-in-law shouted, her mother joined in. My husband and I have always been renting. We were planning to move into a barrier-free apartment eventually. My husband replied nonchalantly. Then you should look elsewhere with the money for that barrier-free apartment. However, her mother said, we used all the money because our daughter brought up this house. We were really deceived. This thought process of occupying the house and pretending to be a victim. This has become a case where we must crush both the parent and child. Then my husband said, but do you know that you messed up the interior of this house by yourselves? What? It was an unexpected point that they hadn't anticipated. The three of them exclaimed in surprise in unison. But after a momentary pause, Ellie regained her sanity and shouted. What? The photo? I threw away the photo. No. You guys knocked down the living room and the adjacent room. You called it remodeling. But isn't it better for the living room to be spacious? My daughter-in-law retorted. Rather than having many old rooms, it's better for 3 people to live together. Her father also joined in. 3 people? It's not 4. It's amazing that my son wasn't included at this point. My husband laughed and said, ha, ha, ha. The 3 of them looked at him with puzzled faces. My husband pointed to a certain place. You cut down the pillar. Oh. When he said that, I noticed where he was pointing. There was certainly a large pillar when I entered and exited. My husband began to speak. The construction company that entered this remodeling was an acquaintance of mine. It was Mr. Wilson. I also remembered the name of the person he was talking about. Actually, my husband's job is an exterior wall painter. He often gets work from Wilson Construction. The president of Wilson Construction is a one-man contractor and my husband's classmate. You guys told Mr. Wilson to cut the pillar because you wanted to remodel it here. When Mr. Wilson tried to say, but that pillar, he heard a condescending remark from you guys saying, yes, just listen to what the customer says, this construction company. Mr. Wilson was troubled and consulted me, so I replied, please respond as they say. You guys didn't listen, and you didn't listen to your wife's argument this time either. You should pay for your own mistakes. What? It was clear from their expressions that the price was too high. This house is old as you guys say. It's a house built with one pillar supporting it. It has lost its main pillar and is now supported by walls. Even if it doesn't collapse all at once like in a comedy, various parts will come loose eventually. Leave before it collapses. Even if you say that, we have nowhere else to go. You have a big sin for knowing and leaving it alone. Fix it with your own money. Luke suddenly intervened in the noisy argument. There's no reason to help others. What? My daughter-in-law shouted in a frenzy. Did I do something? Of course. It's a splendid crime called real estate invasion. And you damaged property by throwing away photos without permission. What? She shouted again at the words that could be answered immediately. My son answered. Of course. You guys lived in someone else's house without permission. Wait a minute, isn't that strange? I'm your wife. My daughter-in-law clung to her son with a half smile. But my son was cold. If this were my house, even if my spouse lived there without permission, it wouldn't be a crime. But this is in my mother's name that she inherited. If my mother sues, the police will move. My son continued. You called me an outsider even though I'm your family. If I weren't here, you wouldn't have any connection with this house in the first place. Even though it was a condition of our marriage for me to follow you on your business trip, you broke that too and lived in my mother's house without permission. But you don't seem to understand that. It's a difference in values. Divorce. This makes you outside. Leave by tomorrow. If you don't leave, I'll call the police. My daughter-in-law collapsed weakly. My son put green paper in front of her. Her father and mother were also stunned when they saw the green paper before hearing the words, "Call the police." In the end, as expected, my daughter-in-law and her parents left the empty house reluctantly. By the way, when a house makes a sound like a snap or a rustle, it's called a house ringing, which is a sound that occurs when wood swells or dries due to humidity and is not usually a supernatural phenomenon. After the divorce, my wife became an illegal resident and could no longer live in the neighborhood. My parents also spent all their money on overseas travel, so the three of us were wandering around. As for me, I put the photo I rescued that day at home and started praying with my mother's photo. Since then, I've felt like my houseplants are doing well and even my cactus has bloomed. Well, I don't know if it was a small blessing or just a coincidence, but I interpreted it as my mother and father watching over me, which was very much appreciated. In the end, that land became a parking lot. Now, due to its location near the station, there are many people coming and going. And then, a few years later, my son got remarried. This time, it seems that his new wife will accompany him on his transfer. It's tough to move around and rebuild relationships with people. But if I can offer souvenirs from various places, my ancestors can eat local sweets from different places and will be happy. As she offered wine to the photo, his new wife murmured, "We'll come again with the three of us next time." Huh? I immediately caught that little word and asked again. "Well, that's what I mean." She smiled. The gentle scent of roses next to the photo seemed to waft through the air at that moment.